4 years ago, a group of dissenting Labour MPs left the party to start the centrist so-called Change UK. At the time, they claimed they were doing so because of anti-Semitism and Brexit. Indeed, they said as much in their founding statement on their website, although that has since been taken down. One of them was Mike Gapes, a lifelong Labour man who joined the party aged 16. To say that Mr Gapes is a career politician is something of an understatement. In 1977, he was the party's first national student organiser and worked at Labour Party HQ for 15 years until 1992. He then became the Labour MP for Ilford South. But after leaving the party in 2019 and then standing against it in a general election, Mike Gapes has now rejoined Labour. He explained his reasons in the Times newspaper. "I was horrified by the state of the party. The traditional Labour values I've always held dear of social justice, security and internationalism had been forgotten, replaced by a purity cult that would soon enough prove itself to be repellent to the British public. But the truth is, I didn't leave Labour. Labour left me. It also left the millions of mainstream, moderate people that make up the backbone of this country and have always been the core of Labour's vote." So that's why he left, but why is he back? Gapes continues. "Today I'm more enthusiastic about the party's future than I have been in years. I'm as determined to see it win and as excited as when I first joined as a 16-year-old boy in Chigwell, Essex, 54 years ago. The change in the past few years has been profound. The Labour Party is back on track. Watching from the outside, I've been incredibly impressed by the way Keir Starmer has relentlessly focused on making it once again a patriotic, serious party of mainstream Britain. On the big issues facing the country, Labour is once again aligned with the British public, rather than special interests. Whether it's strong fiscal rules and respect for the taxpayers' money, the plans to bring quality jobs of the future to towns and cities across the country, the desperately needed investment in education, health and social care, and reform of public services, or the patriotic and internationalist foreign policy, it is clear that Labour is a party worth voting for again. Mike Gapes seems to know a lot more about Labour's policy agenda than the rest of us, it seems." Party leader Keir Starmer responded to the news of Mike Gapes rejoining with this tweet. "That Mike has rejoined our party shows how much we've changed our party to face the public, root out anti-Semitism, support business, be proud of our NATO membership. I know there is much more to do so we can change our country and deliver our missions for a better Britain." Incredible, isn't it? Mike Gapes, he worked for the party his entire life. He worked at headquarters 15 years. He was a student organiser. He was an MP. Apparently this guy represents the average person, Joe Bloggs, walking down the street. It's important to say in that tweet that Starmer equates supporting business with opposing anti-Semitism, though Mike and Keir never seem to have started a business of their own. Is this the same as being a racist? Who thinks that? The leader of the opposition, apparently. There's also a word which nobody is mentioning, certainly not Mike Gapes. It wasn't in his op-ed or in Keir Starmer's tweet. Can you guess what it is? Starts with B. I'm talking about Brexit, of course. Now, personally, I find that strange, given that when Mike Gapes left the party 4 years ago, he literally said he was, quote, furious that the Labour leadership is complicit in facilitating Brexit. He was furious! Furious! Red in the face! Although he's that all the time, so maybe that wasn't a giveaway. So furious that he left to join Change UK and voted against a customs union and various soft Brexits in the House of Commons. And he's now rejoined a party that is committed to not joining the single market. Starmer has even said he will back Sunak's Brexit deal. Is Mike Gapes still furious, I wonder? The story of how people who claim to want to stop Brexit actually helped guarantee the hardest possible version is mind-bending. From Change UK to the Liberal Democrats, they voted down every single compromise on Brexit, everyone. That meant that the only thing left was the hardest Brexit of all, which is what Keir Starmer is now supporting, and which is presumably one reason why Mike Gapes is so enthusiastic. Michael, this whole thing was a giant con job, wasn't it? We said it at the time, Michael. We didn't want to be right about this, but when they said this is all about Brexit, promise, turns out, had nothing to do with it.
the cynicism of it is just unreal. Like, I can't believe how normal it has become in British politics to see this sort of triplet of, it is now a party which roots out anti-Semitism, supports business, and supports NATO. Like, everyone reads that tweet and is supposed to think that's normal. Like, these are now sort of like the three things which are completely comparable. Racism is bad, and socialism is bad, and anti-imperialism is bad, and they're all equally bad. And these are all things which Keir Starmer has very, very successfully pushed out of the Labour Party. Just seems it makes it seem like potentially their big hoo-ha about racism wasn't necessarily as sincere as many people and many credulous journalists have made it out to be. And I think this point about Brexit is super important as well. As you say, when Change UK was formed, yeah, they made it a little bit about anti-Semitism. I think they made it more about Brexit because they thought that would take more votes to them. There are more people at the time who they presumed would be willing to break away from the Labour Party because they opposed Brexit. That was a bigger electoral issue than the anti-Semitism row, whatever you think of it, right? So that was the big thing they led on when they left. But now, because Keir Starmer has suddenly done a complete 180 when it comes to Brexit, it's gone out the window, and suddenly business and NATO have been inserted, things which weren't particularly talked about at the time. So it's this complete pick and choose where people are completely able to rewrite history. Remember what these people did as well after they became Change UK MPs. They became Change UK MPs. I forget whatever party they were in when it came to 2019. Lost their elections as Lib Dems, I think. Then they all went to work for PR consultancies. And, obviously complete careerists. That's their trajectory. But the media look at them all as if sort of like, oh no, these are legitimate, brave voices of the opposition to anti-Semitism, the support of business and the support of NATO. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? This is so weird, right? And it's just incredibly embarrassing. I try not to think about it too much because I don't like to get too annoyed about things I can't really change. But so I try not to make my political identity like hating these people. But whenever it does get brought up, it's difficult for it not to drive you mad.
I think, the hypocrisy is incredible. And it's important to say, like you said, Michael, they didn't just go to Change UK. Luciana Berger, Chuck Romana, a few others went to the Lib Dems. And then they went to go for like Edelman and like big PR companies and stuff. And the reason why the media doesn't attack these guys is because, let's be real, they go for dinner with them. They're friends with them. They went to university with them. Their kids go to the same schools. It's a club. It's several thousand people in London controlling all of it. And if you don't want to be friends with those guys, like Michael and me, it doesn't mean we're not nice people. It just means we want to actually serve our audience and get to the facts of the matter. Well, then you're in trouble. Then you're not a credible, legitimate person in the British media. Michael, I want to ask you a question now because we talked about Gapes. Clearly, look, he said in his statement, this is about Brexit. I'm furious about Brexit. And now he hasn't mentioned it once in the Times piece, once, right? It's not like he's dialed it down. It's not mentioned. Does the same apply for Starmer's own positioning on Brexit? Because this genuinely strikes me as further evidence that Starmer's politicking was about ruining his party's chances of winning the 2019 election. It's so brazen here with Gapes. It does make me reconsider with Starmer. Was this a wrecking strategy from the inside? I personally think it was. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure. I really don't know about this one. I mean, I think with Change UK and those guys, what they were very much trying to do was explicitly to sort of increase the salience of the Brexit issue to undermine Corbyn. By 2019, after those European elections and before the general election in 2019, even I thought, Labour have been leading on the Remainers for such a long time by saying, we will leave a second referendum on the table, right? If you've led people on for that long, the salience of it has got so high, it's difficult then not to sort of follow through on what you've been hinting at for years. My big issue with the People's Vote people was their attempt from 2017 onwards to massively increase the salience of Brexit. And my big issue with Corbyn and McDonnell and all of them, in fact, was not so much that they ended up going for the People's Vote in 2019. It was that they didn't nip this thing in the bud in 2017, right? They should have said, of course, we are not going to have a second referendum. Of course, we have to get used to Brexit and we have to, proactively argue for some kind of soft Brexit. Instead, what they did was sort of say, well, we might do, we might, who knows. But we're going to lead you on, you hardcore Remainers, instead of nipping it in the bud. I mean, it's difficult to say with Keir Starmer. I mean, I think he was probably going with where the wind blew. I think probably it was more about him wanting to win the membership to replace Jeremy Corbyn. I think he probably thought that Labour were inevitably going to lose the next election anyway, right? And that pledge to say let's have a second referendum was because he wanted the Remain supporting membership to back him.
Exactly. It wasn't a political position designed for a Labour government to implement in power. I really don't think that. It was about, like you say, his own internal jockeying, and also I think for him to become leader, obviously the other guy has to go first. And I think it was very much, I don't think he didn't believe in it. I think he would rather Britain stays in the EU. I think that's totally true. But it was very much, heads I win, tails you lose kind of situation. And you can see this from, the fact that Angela Smith, who, by the way, she's a lobbyist for the private water industry, the most hated privatized utility we have right now, given they dump excrement and feces into rivers and coastlines on a daily basis in this country. The fact that Angela Smith can go on national television and say to our colleague Ash Sarkar here at Novara Media that she's a funny tinge, and she can be welcomed back into the Labour Party, no problem. Or Mike Gapes here, he rejoins, and Keir Starmer does a tweet. Thanks for joining, Mike. But hold on, when it comes to Jeremy Corbyn, when it comes to the people you dislike, you say, we're going to have this is a complaints process, disciplinary process, has nothing to do with me, Gov. When it's Mike Gapes, so, he's getting out the pom-pom, setting off some fireworks, opening the champagne. It seems very strange to me, Michael, on the one hand to say we have this very, impartial, non-judgmental disciplinary process, except for the people I like, in which case it doesn't apply at all. Again, do you think that whole thing about having an impartial disciplinary process, it's kind of revealed to be rather daft, isn't it, when you see the leader of the opposition celebrating the return of somebody who literally stood against the Labour Party in the last general election?
Neil Coyle is going to be let back in. And he is literally someone who, when he was suspended from the party, that was because of allegations of racism by a journalist. No less. It wasn't just by a factional opponent who was saying you've been racist. It was a journalist who said you were racist to me in Parliament, right? And now it seems as if this guy, there is at least a little bit of pushback with this one. I suppose because the victim was a journalist. I think that probably makes a difference when it comes to the lobby's willingness to basically say, oh, it's the Labour right, so let's just let them get away with it. Because this was one of the few situations where it was a journalist who was concerned. There might be a bit more friction there, but it's clear that those at the top of the Labour Party do want to open the way for Neil Coyle to return. That's why we're hearing so many noises about it. It was always a joke. No one in the Labour Party cares really about fair processes, right? No faction really cares about fair process when it comes to the Labour Party. There'll be a few people sort of stuck in the middle who really do, but they're never going to be the people that have much power in the party. They will always end up being tools of the people who want to use disciplinary processes towards factional means. This doesn't mean that every disciplinary decision is to try and beat the right. Like I think when the Labour left were in power, lots of disciplinary decisions were made because they thought, well, we have to make this disciplinary decision so that we don't get attacked from the right, right? So it can be defensive as well as offensive, but it's always political. And I think what's so jarring to witness and watch from the outside is that this process, which I think probably, to be honest, all journalists also recognise is very political. When it was the Labour left in charge, this was a reason why this party could not form a government. We could not possibly tolerate a party which has politicised disciplinary processes entering government. When it's the Labour right, we're like, well, this is how parties work, isn't it? Like it is unbelievably jarring. As I say, I try not to think about it too much because I don't want to go mad. There's lots of interesting things going on in the world beyond the hypocrisy and the credulousness and the sort of shameless two-facedness of the British political media that I try not to overthink this, but it is, make no mistake, galling, disgusting, hypocritical, and I think profoundly undemocratic how this was used as a mechanism to completely forestall the possibility of a left-wing government that challenged vested interests in this country and now is completely swept under the rug. Now you have a centrist Labour Party who wants to enter government and doesn't pose any threat to establishment powers.
I was looking at the Novara analytics the other day. What struck me rather was half of the views are coming from people who don't subscribe. And when you think we're almost at 300,000 subscribers, come on. So if you're watching this video and you're not yet a subscriber here at Novara Media, hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything.